Now, although Arsenal have made 7 signings already this summer, they seem to not be done in the market. And surprise reports came out yesterday that defender Piero Hincapie from Bayer Leverkusen could be on his way to the club. Now, in this video, we talk about the player and exactly why Arsenal are looking at him and why he could make a lot of sense given the construct of the team. So let's get into it. Now, like many of you, I was shocked by the news yesterday that Arsenal are still in the market, and more importantly in the market for a defender. Now, there has been murmurs and small reports in the last couple of weeks that Arsenal could still look at a left back depending on the sales, and even with this Hincapie news, it is very much dependent on Kiwior and probably Zinchenko leaving, although it does look like Kiwior is slowly getting closer to leaving to go to Porto on a loan with an obligation, which doesn't really make much difference for us because we will get that money at least next year. Now, luckily for me, it makes my job easier because Piero Hincapie is actually a player I've watched a lot and a player I've been scouting for around 2.5 years now. I've always kind of associated him with maybe going to Liverpool, and especially under Klopp, I thought he would be exactly a perfect guy for Klopp to have as a backup in them positions, but ultimately that didn't materialise, and he's been a backup player when Leverkusen went unbeaten a few years ago, but he came more into the team last year and is still a very viable player at a high level, which is important. Now, in terms of the profile of Hincapie, he is obviously yet again that fullback / centre-back hybrid. We know Arteta loves them. He can't go a season without buying one, in which he is left-footed and plays on this left side. Now, majority of his career and his position is really a set centre-back. He has played centre-back a lot, but majority in a back three. He is on the left side of that defence, which kind of sees him in moves where he's in between the left-back and the centre-back role, and kind of sometimes has to do things that both of them have to do, which you would see in an Arsenal setup, a little bit like what you would see with Eze coming in as that more attacking midfielder / left winger hybrid. He's not really an attacking midfielder, he's in the middle somewhere. Now, Hincapie is still super young. He's only 23 years old, which is much younger for a defender. And you look at the amount of games that he has played, we mentioned a lot in centre-back. Ultimately, it's not a lot overall. He's still widely inexperienced despite being at Leverkusen for a while now. And that is because, yet again, like we said, he's come in the team, although he has played at big competitions such as Champions League, such as Europa League, which is important. Now, first of all, when talking about the defending type of player that Hincapie is, he is that aggressive type of player. Now, although what we've mentioned a lot of times before has been these sort of physical players that run out from the defence. Now, with Arsenal and a lot of the defenders that we go for genuinely are these sort of more physical type of players that will exert the pressure on the ball. Kiwior is not one of these players. He is a player that likes sitting off, waiting a little bit and sort of assessing the danger. He's a bit more of a calmer defender in that way and not necessarily that aggressive physical type, which is a little bit of an outlier compared to other players we have. And I think a great example of that profile is Mascara. Mascara has come in and he kind of reminds me of a mini Gabriel in terms of him on the ball, but off the ball as well. And that physicality, that pace he has, and that sort of ability to just push players over when he runs into them is something that Arsenal need more, I say, alongside a Saliba, and this is why some of these players have been looked at. That's why Mascara came in. Even Calafiori, to an extent, is very physical and runs out of the defence a lot, so that is very much like you're going to see. Now, when we bring Hincapie into the team, let's say if we play him instead of Gabriel in left centre-back, he will kind of be probably the most similar to Gabriel in terms of that physicality. He has that same sort of idea of running at players anywhere on the pitch. If people pick the ball up in these positions and say he has to run back, and you would see Saliba run back with his brilliant recovery time, Hincapie can do that. He's super fast and can cover area really well. I mean, he was the 21st highest on sprint speed, I think, last year in the Bundesliga, which for a defender is kind of crazy. But the big thing about him is that he actually always comes forward. Now, he will have to run back in certain aspects, especially if the last defender, let's say, and sometimes we do switch, so that would happen. But let's say he goes up to these defenders, he is physical and can win the ball back. Now, something he struggles with in this moment is at turning a little bit. If some player gets the ball here, maybe rolls him and goes around him like this, that is kind of where he struggles to adapt his body and adjust. But if a player goes on this side, or maybe a position which is more favoured to him, coming in this way quite aggressively, then he will be able to win the ball back, and he does close down them gaps very quickly, which is definitely a big part about it. And I will say that stats, especially for defenders, have to be taken with a grain of salt because it mostly is down to the way the team plays, much more compared to different positions. Now, if you look at some of his stats in this aspect, he does win a lot of duels, and that's obviously something that we're going to care for. But like we mentioned, because he plays in this sort of left centre-back role where he still has to do a lot of left-back duties a lot of the time, especially with Grimaldo kind of pushing forward to really force that issue. And even the other day, Grimaldo was the only attacking force, it seemed like, for Leverkusen. He often ends up covering a lot of them wing positions, which is good to defend the out wide positions and have that pace to cover them. But it also means that his duel percentage is going to be mostly against wingers, which you do expect a tall defender like him, over 6 foot, physical guy, to be able to win more duels against someone like Serge Gnabry more than a Harry Kane, which might be a little bit harder for him when he plays them sort of big strikers, which will be interesting. Now, Arsenal are a team that are going to have the ball a lot more than others, so that is the sort of big physical defensive attributes you need to care about. How quick is he at getting to areas? How good is he at not fouling people? And this is something that he's actually a lot better at. He used to get loads of yellow cards all the time, but he's actually calmed down a lot over the last year, which is really good to see. And how good he is and how assertive he is at making these decisions. Now, another thing about the game is sitting in low blocks, and Arsenal are a very adaptable team where a lot of our players are this aggressive type of player, but they are used to sitting back and being patient when they need to. Now, Hincapie in these positions, I do think can be a weakness and a positive. And what I mean by that is that aggressive nature as well. Hincapie is not a player that really has that patient level right now. He's very much like he sees a danger, he will go to it and try and make sure he can help. That is brilliant. We want that sort of brilliant level of being able to go out in the defense and kind of take control of that situation. But you don't need to do it all the time. There need to be levels where you are restrained, you are disciplined, and you stay in your position. Now, what I mean by this is that when Hincapie is in these sort of defensive situations, say we're in a low block right now, defending a lead, you know, maybe we've got a stupid red card again. If there's moments where these players are covering others, and let's say there's a run randomly, say they get the ball down the wing and they start to cross it in, and there's a run that people aren't picking up, Hincapie is very likely to go and pick that run up. He is very aware, and I think most people that make these sort of deeper runs, especially like midfielders, he's very good at finding. He won't just do it in the centre. If he's here and he sees a run going this side, he will cover that ground, which I do like. I think as terms of last-ditch defending, that is what you want, and that can really help you. And the problem is, obviously, Arsenal are a very structured system, so if he does that too much, he might leave other gaps open, which we're not picking up in the midfield from other players, and that might cost us in other ways. But ultimately, that's the same sort of issue. You have a lot of physical, sort of impatient, quick players like that, and it's something that he's going to learn. He's only 23, we have to remember that, and he's not going to be totally refined. And how many times is he going to be in this position anyway with Arsenal, not having big defenders around him? You would imagine Saliba and Gabriel and other players would still be there to help him a lot of the time. So that is a very unique situation where in the time being, I do think he can learn. Now, obviously, that defensive part is going to matter a lot, but I do think as long as we have other good defenders that are going to be physical and help him, I don't think it's that big of a deal. I look at Mosquera as a real specialist at tackling and winning the ball back, and if you look at Hincapie's stats, they are good, but also he does do really well, and I do think we will talk about where he fits in for Arsenal, but I think that's not big of an issue as people may think it is. Now, another big thing, though, that does matter is how is he going to attack in terms of his passing and his carrying and that overlapping nature, which I know a lot of people have been speaking about. Now, if you look at this graphic by Scott Willis, who I would recommend going to check out on Twitter at Cannon Stats, he sees here that Hincapie makes a lot of these passes into this sort of left side area that gets the team up the pitch. Obviously, with his position, this makes a lot of sense. Playing in the back three a lot of the time in build-up would do this as well. But ultimately, he's very good at finding these like width passes down the side. Now, in situations where Arsenal are trying to counter quickly, like we have seen Arsenal try and do a lot more and be a little bit more assertive and quick on that move down the left-hand side, I think he can help quite a lot. Now, if we look at this situation where we were talking about against Manchester United, this happened, where Arsenal ended up putting the ball into, I think Rice got the ball here, Calafiori moved over here, and we did this quick move where Martinelli passed it into Calafiori, who's just offside. And something I think is really good is these areas, if you bring in a Hincapie, this is where he can be really good. Now, I know people have worries about how much he gets pressed because he doesn't get pressed a lot in the Bundesliga given their league and given where he is in positions. The players take him away from him. So he has a lot of space in these areas. Now, Arsenal will get space in these areas sometimes. I do think against lower teams that are sitting deeper, this is something that can help. But it also can help if he can get his passes across quite easily and quickly. And what I mean by that is in these areas, he can make these really assertive passes down the side. Something I think is going to be really good for him is that he can kind of just over the top pass in this this area for the half space where you can see someone like Calafiori run through. Something that's going to be good is we see these passes by Gabriel where he does this sort of hidden pass over the top. He's been doing it for about a season and a bit now, where he just kicks it over the top out of nowhere. We see Trossard very good at reacting to that. I think Hincapie can do that. I think he's great on the floor. I think he's assertive with his passing, and his passing is quite encouraging. I do think he makes a lot of good passes throughout the game, and you want a more passer type in there, then he is that player. At the moment it's Kiwior, but Hincapie might help you in other ways a little bit better. And I do think this has to be taken into quarantation that he will be the replacement for Jakub Kiwior, and the more you look at the player, the more it makes sense for that. Now, the reason why I think he's probably better than Kiwior, I think he's probably a little bit worse in passing sense, but he is more physical and aggressive, which, like we said, is more that type that Arteta likes. I think in terms of going forward, he will be a much more beneficial player. Now, what I mean by this is that not only his carrying is quite good for a player, he kind of reminds me a little bit of Calafiori with that pace that he's got, which we mentioned, where he can make good runs and bait players towards him to pass the ball through. But that is not where I think is the most important thing. And you've probably seen that one clip on Twitter that's been making the rounds of him overlapping and putting a good cross in for a Leverkusen goal. Now, Hincapie is not someone that has overlapped a lot for Leverkusen. Like we mentioned, he plays in a back three. He plays as that left centre back majority of the time, and he has built up in a back three as well, which is something he can do for Arsenal in that 3-2-5 setup, but it won't be the thing I think he's used for. Now, what I think we will do, given his pace, given his physicality, and given his strength, I think Arsenal will use him a little bit like we used to do with Tomiyasu. Not only is he allowed to probably roam into more central areas like a Calafiori does, but I actually think Hincapie might be stuck on that touchline a lot more. He's a good runner into space, he can keep the ball well, and that passing level is insane. So if he can carry the ball at least past one player, or at least down to that byline, and then get in a good cross, that is the be or end all of Arsenal. We need good crosses, and it's something we focus on a lot in our team. Even now when we're playing much better, the crosses are still a big factor of it. Now, in terms of crosses, he does make quite a few. He makes over 1 per 90, which isn't a lot for a fullback, but obviously that's compared to a lot of wing-backy types as well, and he is still playing in centre-back. He is willing to overlap when he needs to and get in them areas. And I do think this all kind of epiculates my argument for him, and I think why Arsenal are looking at him, and I think it's because they will turn him into a left-sided Ben White. He is kind of similar to Ben White in terms of on the ball. I'd say he's a lot less composed than Ben White. He's one of our most composed individuals back there, but he's also that sort of assured passer that kind of finds his way out of these tight areas. Ben White was not an overlapping fullback when he joined Arsenal, he was a centre-back. But I think if Eze is going to be your left winger position, having someone like Hincapie always overlap and be there is a very good idea. And one of the reasons is because Calafiori cannot stay fit, and we just do not have the reliability there. And two, because like I said before, Calafiori's good at overlapping, but he's so much better at doing everything and being chaotic in the final third. And you don't want to lose that sometimes by forcing him on the touchline in every game. So I think this could be a great level to play in certain aspects where you bring Hincapie in, where you can play left back and overlap off the ball, which that pace is going to be very important. Now, in terms of the fee that is going on, it's looking like it will be around 40 to 50 million pounds. He's got a release clause around 65 million euros, but he wants to be lowered to around 45, and he wants to leave Arsenal about 37 mil. And let's say Kiwior goes with a loan with an obligation for around 20 to 30 mil. It would make sense to pay an extra 8 million pounds for this guy to come in as that upgrade, because I think he offers that attacking nature which we want. Now, he can also play in centre back. I think that's fine. I worry about him in the back four. He hasn't played there a lot, and I still think that maybe the angles aren't that beneficial to him. I kind of think he has been more in this wing position because of the back three that he's played, and I ultimately think for Arsenal right now, being a left back is probably more important than being a centre back. And I think we've all been talking about Miles moving more into midfield. I think that's the idea. Calafiori is definitely the best left back we have at the club, but he can't play every game and is not reliable. And I think if Miles can be used there sometimes still, which is fine, but I also think if you use him in midfield from the start in some games, it can really benefit him. If that is the chance and that is the future of him, which I believe it is, then it needs to be sort of portrayed in that. But I ultimately think it would be a good signing for the fee. He wouldn't be a starter, but 30 to 40 mil. He can rotate with Calafiori, maybe rotate with Gabriel. I'm not really as fond about that at the moment, but as long as he makes overlapping runs, I think we'll all enjoy him, and that will make Eze better. That will make the forward line better as well, which will give us a different dynamic approach, which is what we need. And yet again, we're just not leaving ourselves short, so I can't particularly complain really, especially if we make another signing. But obviously we don't know what is going to happen with this deal so far. Thank you guys for watching. Let me know what you think in the comments, and I will see you in the next one.